Another thing I hear on these personality intros is that you're supposed to introduce secondary characters so people can get to know them as well as they get to know you. So there's a wife. Brilliant. I've been working hard at this for 3 years, piecing it together, putting it together, writing the perfect script free of repetition or irrelevant tautological word statements. And it's here, finally. The times when the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES if you call it by its true name, beat the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you want to call it by its false name. I have gone back to the well. I have sold out. May Zombie Jeebus have mercy on my soul. It's games, and they're compared, and they're not all strictly the same game, just under the same release umbrella or release gazebo, but I've compared them all anyway, and come to a striking conclusion. There was more Konami in this list before I deleted some Konami games. That's the truth. Blast 7 mode processing engaged. Let's do a list of games that were better on SNES than on Mega Drive. This arcade game from Konami mixed classic run-and-gunning action with a cheeky Wild West setting and was, it's fair to say, something I thought was incredibly cool when I was pre-10 years old, as I was when it first came out. So Sunset Riders making the jump to home consoles was exactly what I needed in my life, and even though the arcade version had to be chopped down significantly to make it function properly on the Mega Drive, I was happy. It was absolutely fine. A decent, though smudged photocopy of the arcade original, and a fun time. It was the best we could expect, really. Until 1993 at least, when Konami had another pop and brought Sunset Riders to SNES, where it was far closer to the arcade original and made us all wonder aloud just what the hell it had been playing at with the Sega version. 4 characters to choose from, 2 on Mega Drive, all 8 levels and bosses, 4 levels split into 2 parts each with 4 bosses on Mega Drive, a good impression of the arcade's graphics, a less good impression on the Mega Drive. It was all there. It even had the voice samples like the never-forgotten "Bury me with my money" from Stage 1's boss. The SNES version wasn't arcade perfect, sure, but it was a hell of a lot closer than that charlatan Mega Drive game had been a year prior. Not even close? Not even close.
Marry me with my money.
I cannot think of a game I played more on my SNES as a youth than Mortal Kombat 2, so perhaps I'm a little bit biased here, but the facts don't lie. Nintendo's MK2 wiped the floor with Sega's. Whereas first time around we had that kneecapped version on SNES lacking blood and with input lag measured in meters, for the follow-up Nintendo had dropped its daft censorship rules and sculptured software had pulled its finger out. The result was one of the best home ports of Mortal Kombat 2 and a real vindication for SNES owners the world over, who had to put up with Mega Drive owners rubbing it in about blood and responsive controls for, well, a couple of years. That's not to say the Mega Drive version of MK2 was bad at all. It was very good. It just didn't stand on an equal footing to the SNES version, which looked better, controlled better thanks to a 6-button pad as standard, featured all the blood and secrets short of the Virgality finisher on Mega Drive, and was just generally that bit better than Sega's version. Some comparisons have grey areas and arguments that can be made either way. This is not one of them.
Marry me with my money.
In no way was the Mega Drive version of Batman and Robin a bad game, though it was a peculiar one mixing the Caped Crusader with something like Gunstar Heroes, and it was a fair bit of fun even if it really did rely a lot on punishing difficulty to hammer home how much of an insignificant blot the player was, and is. But then I'd expect to be called insignificant given I'm the sort of person who, when given the option, chooses to be Robin over Batman. But the game. On Mega Drive, it was something different to the tide of bat-shaped platformers we'd seen before on the console and others previously. It was fun. It wasn't great, but it was fine. But it wasn't really Batman. That's where the SNES stepped in and upped the game to the point where a fair few minds were permanently blown. In the first 10 minutes of the Mega Drive version, you're in a dark street shooting goons, and that's pretty much where you stay. It's atmospheric, there's a really cool 3D effect on the platform in the middle of the screen, but it's rather static. In the first 10 minutes of the SNES game, you're battering goons, navigating a funhouse, having your own Bat Shadow the Colossus moment, and riding on a roller coaster while the Joker throws parachuting grenades at you. It's a mite more Batman-y, and infinitely more atmospheric, exciting, and in keeping with the cartoon series on which it's based. Batman and Robin on Mega Drive was a fun enough game, but Batman and Robin on the SNES was an excellent Batman game.
Marry me with my money.
First, the similarities. Both Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting (SNES) and Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition Mega Drive were practically the same thing. The Mega Drive had a team battle mode, but beyond that both games included Champion and Turbo editions, and while the SNES needed a cheat to unlock it, 10-star speed was in there and just as unplayable on both formats. All the characters, all the levels, all the special moves, there really wasn't much at all between them. Visually, it was a bit more colourful on SNES, and audio-wise, the Mega Drive's voice samples sounded like a particularly shrill squirrel was being choked with a bag over its head. But none of that made one demonstrably better than the other. So, what did? 6 buttons. Again, a million heads exploding at this, but the Mega Drive had a 6-button pad and it had a better layout for Street Fighter II than the SNES's standard pad, they say. And they're right. But the key words there, the SNES's standard pad. The Mega Drive didn't come with a 6-button controller as standard outside of some later South American packs from Tectoy and the like, and while we did see special Street Fighter II console packs including a lone 6-button pad to tie in with the game's launch, there was a later Street Fighter pack that just included 3-button controllers, so yeah. Basically, you had to pay extra to be able to play it without having to press start to switch between punches and kicks, unless you were buying a brand new console, and only if you were buying the specific launch Street Fighter bundle and not the later one, or you were in South America in about 1998. Phew. I only had a 3-button pad for my Mega Drive, as did most people with the console, so that pain of pressing start to switch up attacks was pretty universal. The SNES had a 6-button controller as standard. If you had a SNES and a pad, you were set. You didn't have to pay any extra. The SNES version of Street Fighter II Turbo was better. Even if the Mega Drive one had the attract mode included.
Marry me with my money.
Smash TV riffed on the Running Man, which for some reason showed up in game form as a twin-stick arcade shooter, literally with 2 joysticks, one to control your character movements, the other to control their direction of fire as they attempted to win big money, big prizes, I love it, by surviving ever-increasing onslaughts of bald men with bats. It was phenomenal, shallow, too hard fun. So when Super Smash TV came to the Mega Drive, people were pumped. Great game, and something we'd be able to put a bit more time into without having to waste all our 10p's trying to get past Mutoid Man. We forgot about the controls. You could use 2 control pads, one in each hand for a double joystick setup, but the default method of control for Mega Drive Smash saw 1 pad, 3 buttons. 1 button fired in the direction you're facing, another locked your direction of fire, the third allowed you to shoot in the opposite direction to where you were moving. An admirable effort by Probe. It was garbage, but still, creative thought, eh? Would you believe it, not only did the SNES version of Super Smash TV look and sound better than that on Mega Drive, but it controlled infinitely better. 4 face buttons on a SNES pad translated to 2 sides of a controller capable of being used as directional inputs, aka 2 joysticks, as standard, at home. I almost beat Mutoid Man in 1 credit thanks to the fact you're able to control the SNES version well. Another point to back the superiority up, follow-up non-sequel Total Carnage was brought to SNES, but not Mega Drive. Midway had learned its lesson.
Marry me with my money.
Bob was never a great, more just an expressive face in a platformer, something that didn't stand out in the early to mid-90s given so many games included expressive faces in platformers. But it was absolutely fine. Fine enough to be included in 2006's EA Replay for PSP, and telling enough that EA went with the SNES port for that compilation. The game itself was largely the same across both formats with identical level layouts, the same enemies, the same bit at the bottom of the ladder I kept dying at, and so on. The Mega Drive version was duller in colour and missing some idle animations, and its scrolling was smoother on SNES, but really there wasn't much between the two. At least until you remember, again, that buttons exist. See, on the SNES you had a button to change weapons, a button to change items, and a button to punch. So you were able on the fly to change up your approach and batter enemies in the face to save ammo as you go. On the Mega Drive, meanwhile, you're forced to pause the game to go into the menu every time you want to switch out weapons or items, and to use your punch, you had to actually assign it as a weapon, hence it going from being something used to save ammo, a strategic choice on the player's part, to a last-ditch weapon you use after you've run out of bullets. And that's just not good. Looser controls on the Mega Drive 2 led to a game that was just fundamentally flawed next to the obvious lead version on SNES.
Money.
What a difference a format can make. The 2 versions of Turtles Tournament Fighters for SNES and Mega Drive were very different, even if both were one-on-one fighting games. The SNES version was quick-paced, technical, combo-based, and put up a decent challenge to Street Fighter II's dominance. The Mega Drive version had Casey Jones in it? Now, I played the Mega Drive version most as a child. I didn't play the SNES version at all until I was older. The Sega game was the one my friend had. It was the one we played for those endless hours in childhood, trying to master the only version of the game that was in front of us. I can say I loved Tournament Fighters on the Mega Drive, but that was a love born of circumstance, not one coming from any particular quality, or even a vaguely manageable difficulty level. If only we'd known, eh? All that time the SNES version could have been picked up, well, we could have begged and pleaded our parents for it. But either way, we could have had a significantly better game to play, and one that does still hold up to this day. I don't even need to explain. The static backgrounds, the dull looks, the awful sound, the mind-breaking levels of ridiculous difficulty even on the lowest setting. It all made for a Sega version that fell well short of what Nintendo had on its machine. You could even play as Shredder on the SNES, while the Mega Drive saw you limited to this beetle thing. It was, in short, not even a contest.
Murray.
Well before jumping into the world of Orcs and Men and MMOs I've still never played, not even once, Blizzard made a game about racing and rock. Oh, and roll. And Rock and roll racing stood out in a crowded console racing field not because it was the best or most original, but because of its presentation. Most important in that aspect was, well, the rock and roll, obviously. Featuring a mix of cover versions like Bad to the Bone, Paranoid and Born to be Wild, the game was elevated from humble racing roots to a genuinely cool level of racer. Sure, the SNES wasn't perfect in its recreations of the songs, so these days it does sound a bit twee? But yeah, in 1993 this was hot shit. You'd be burning around courses with Black Sabbath sort of wailing away in the background, an announcer blurting out stuff every few seconds. It was intense, it was exciting, and not to labour the point too much, it was cool. This preamble is because I need to hammer home a point. The audio in Rock and Roll Racing wasn't just there, it was the soul of the game. And this was the music in the Mega Drive version. Fueling the dumpster fire was the fact that the commentary would interrupt the music every time it piped up, resulting in some kind of staccato rock. The game bit on Mega Drive was fine. It even had extra track variations over the original release, but the port was still an abject failure next to the SNES version. I guarantee you if this had come out on Mega Drive first, racing and rock and roll wouldn't be remembered as fondly as it is today.
Money. Me with my money.
Mega Drive fans like to cry blast processing in between shrieks of Nintendo, at least if they were subjected to the tremendously poor marketing campaigns Sega ran in the States. But while the process of blast wasn't actually used in any shipped games, look it up, the SNES's oft-mentioned Mode 7 popped up all over the place. And Street Racer offered a brilliant comparison between what a console using Mode 7 could do and what one without could handle. I won't beat on the Mega Drive version, it's a half-decent combat racer, it has some fine scrolling. It's alright, it's fun. The football minigame made me want to vomit, but that's a minigame and nobody cares about those, so it's not important. It's absolutely fine. And then I played the SNES version and went, oh. It was like the Mega Drive version was from a previous generation, with Nintendo's take on, and I quote the marketing, Mario Kart crossed with Street Fighter, brighter, more colourful, featuring larger sprites, more detailed tracks, and actual track rotation thanks to the SNES's 7th graphical mode. 8th, actually, because there was a Mode 0, but only a pedant would point that out. Wait, what? Street Racer never came out on the Mega Drive, Genesis if I must, in the States, and I do wonder why. In fact, it only released in Europe and Brazil for Sega's 16-bit machine. Could it have been down to the impending Saturn release, which saw a significantly better version of the game, even better than that on the PlayStation? Maybe. But maybe it was just because, next to the SNES version, Street Racer on Mega Drive looked like a half-finished project. If you ignored the graphical and sound differences between the two versions of Saturday Night Slam Masters, on paper it looked like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The SNES had the 4-player mode intact, but the Mega Drive added in an exclusive deathmatch mode. Sega's machine let you play as the boss characters in single and multiplayer, while Nintendo's console featured them, but only in multiplayer. It could have gone either way. By the way, the game's Japanese name was ever so slightly better: Muscle Bomber: The Body Explosion. Anyway, when you moved away from the on paper and got to the in practice, it became more clear-cut. Slam Master's 4-player mode absolutely squashed the deathmatch, the latter never feeling like much more than a hasty gimmick introduced to make up for the lack of tag team wrestle brawling. And to be fair, being able to use the bosses in single player means very little in the grand scheme. Basically, the Mega Drive version was cut back and it showed. 4 players did require the multi-tap, of course, but this isn't like that other Capcom game on this list where missing out on a particular peripheral massively harmed your fun with the game. Slam Masters was still good enough in 2-player, it was just far better in 4-player, and that wasn't even an option on the Mega Drive. SNES gets the cheeky roll-up for the win here. This was a weird one, but what can you do? Sparkster on Mega Drive was the sequel to Rocket Knight Adventures, while Sparkster on the SNES was a spin-off, but not a direct sequel to Rocket Knight Adventures, even though both games starred the eponymous possum and had the same name, and both came out within a week of each other, and were both made by Konami. Because why not, eh? Anyway, Sparkster on Mega Drive was great. Really fun mix of action and platforming with some brilliant jetpacking around and a bit where you screwed a boss to death, and I didn't write any euphemisms here, which is unexpected. Sparkster on SNES was great. A really fun mix of platforming and action with some brilliant jetpacking around and a lot more hanging off trees like a possum than the Sega game, similar to how it was in the original game. And that's where the split comes in. Sparkster on SNES, even though it wasn't the actual follow-up to the first game, ended up playing more like a direct sequel than the Mega Drive version did, even though the Mega Drive version was subtitled Rocket Knight Adventures 2 in Japan. I'm so confused. Anyway, while some did praise the Mega Drive game for evolving the formula from the original, to me this was a case of it moving too far away from what made the original so special. A slower pace with more thought involved, rather than just blasting through at super speed, pretty much. I will admit this is the loosest SNES victory in this whole video, but for me it does go the way of Nintendo thanks to Sparkster, that's Sparkster on SNES, not Sparkster on Mega Drive, being more faithful to the original on which it's based, but not a sequel of. Jesus. The first of Acclaim's collection of tug-of-war based grapple 'em ups for the 16-bit consoles, Super WrestleMania was a minor revelation at the time of its release. A bit. In a way. It ratcheted up the presentation and set the wheels in motion on making wrestling games more like the TV shows, more atmospheric, more a product than a sports sim. What I'm saying is, Super WrestleMania was the reason we got WWE 2K20. But I digress. Supes Mania was another case of a game just generally looking and sounding better on SNES than on Mega Drive, with the brightness and clarity of the WrestleMen, no Alundra Blaze here yet, sorry, and the audio sensation of these half-decently recreated music cues objectively seeing Nintendo outperform Sega. But that's not a good enough reason by itself, is it? Let's dig a bit deeper. Mega Drive Mania did include something over the SNES in the form of finishing moves specific to individual wrestlers. Them not being in the Ninty version still boggles the mind to this day, given they've been an integral part of the non-sport for decades. But they weren't very good, they weren't accurate, they looked like crap. Far from adding a feature that was cool and gave the Mega Drive the edge, they made it look like a hacked version of the game. Then there were the 8 superstars to choose from compared to 10 on SNES. And the selection? Oh, good crikey. On the SNES you could be The Undertaker or Jake the Snake, you could put together proper tag teams like the Natural Disasters, even the Legion of Doom. What did they give us on Mega Drive? Papa Shango, IRS, and the early career Shawn Michaels nobody really cared that much about. You will be pleased to know Papa Shango remained a Mega Drive exclusive in 1993 follow-up WWF Royal Rumble too. Tells you all you need to know, I think.
Marry me with my money.
T2 on Mega Drive was absolutely fine, but at the same time very much the sort of arcade-to-home port you expect. It looked like a past-gen game, it had been chopped back significantly to fit as much content as possible in there, and it generally lacked the oomph of the original. But hey, you could play it with the Menacer, Sega's light gun, which meant forking out however much that piece of garbage was to play a light gun game badly because those bloody things never did work properly. No thanks. T2 on the SNES looked a lot better, and while at the same time it was very much a home-to-arcade port, it wasn't quite as cut back as you might have expected. Where the Mega Drive version came across like a child had been shown the game then asked to draw their interpretation of it from memory, the SNES version looked like someone had recorded the original on a bit of crappy quality VHS. It was all there, and it sort of looked like how it was supposed to, but you could tell it wasn't quite right. But hey, you could play it with Nintendo's light cannon, the Super Scope, which meant forking out however much that piece of garbage was to play a light gun game badly because those bloody things never did work properly. Yes, please! You might be wondering why I just went, yes, please, there, just then, when I said those words. Well, it's because another peripheral entered the fray to make the SNES version of T2 the ultimate. Yes, it cost more money, and yes, it didn't come as standard, but hey, screw it, the base game was clearly better on SNES than on Mega Drive anyway. What I'm talking about is the SNES mouse. You could use a mouse to play T2 on SNES, thus making the whole thing a lot more fun. At least until you got to the truck defending level and lost all faith in humanity to the point you were actively hoping for Skynet to have a bad day and take it out on us all.
Bury me with my money. Marry me.
I'm not even trolling. At the same time, I'm not blind. The SNES version of Doom was very clearly inferior in many ways to the 32X version, which is to be expected what with the whole more powerful hardware and all that. But that's the point. Doom shouldn't have been possible on the SNES. Yes, it needed a souped up Super FX2 chip in there and the game cost about 60 or 70 quid as a result. Yes, the ceiling was untextured. Yes, enemies in the distance were a few squiggly pixels. Yes, it ran like a dog half the time, but it was Doom. It was there, it was available for anyone who had a SNES. The 32X, meanwhile, got a version of Doom that ran fine, but one where it was still running in a small window and, more importantly, one that was missing an entire episode. The SNES lost 5 levels, sure, but the bigger and hardier 32X lost significantly more. You couldn't even get the game's best weapon, the BFG 9000, without entering a cheat because the levels with it in weren't included in the game. Cyber Demons and Spider Demons weren't present in the 32X version, they were on SNES. The 32X didn't get multiplayer, the SNES did. Sega's Doom had some of the worst implementations of the game's music ever committed to any format, ever. Listen. And topping it all off, Doom on 32X cost about 60 quid, plus 170 quid for the actual 32X. From a technical perspective, the Sega version of Doom was definitely better, apart from the music. But looking at the bigger picture, there were just too many mistakes, there was too much missing to make the 32X version anything more than a massive letdown when compared to the near miracle that was the SNES game. With 1 year between versions and an entire, well, half a generation between them, it should not have gone down like this. And it was yet another way in which the SNES beat the Mega Drive, and, in this case, the 32X. And there it is, the ones I could think of, or find, or get advice about, the times the SNES resoundingly beat the Mega Drive. Oh, I lied, I wasn't working on this for 3 years, that wasn't even a joke, just a blatant falsehood. This may have been a follow-up video taking 3 years to arrive, but I only worked on it for a couple of weeks, and that's the magic of video making. Comments, tell me I'm saying SNES wrong in 3, 2, 1. Bye!
Money.